Okay, let's take a break. Just a quick break. Not forever, not for the whole week, but just for like 20 minutes or so. Let's talk about something other than the quarterback. That's my gift to you on today's Morning Pitt on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Yeah, I mean, that's all we've been doing for the last, basically since Saturday night, and longer than that. I mean, we've been talking about the quarterback dating back to the Cincinnati game, certainly the post-game show on that one, and the whole week following. I mean, I was just looking back over our videos here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, and it was maybe last Monday. No, probably last Tuesday. I think the video was, should Pitt make a change at quarterback? So we've been talking about this for the better part of a week and a half now, and we're going to keep talking about it. We're going to keep talking about quarterbacks all the way heading into Saturday night's game, and my guess is we'll keep talking about quarterbacks coming out of Saturday night's game. We'll have another sit-down interview with Pat Narduzzi tomorrow. You'll be able to see video of that here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, and we'll have a transcript at Panther-Lair.com, and so you'll see all of it, but you can bet we're going to ask them about quarterbacks again, including that big question that nobody really asked on Monday of who's going to start on Saturday night. I'd like to get Pat Narduzzi to either commit one way or the other. Now look at me. Here I go. I'm talking about quarterbacks again. I said we weren't going to do this today. Today's Morning Pit is about something other than quarterbacks, just so we can all, myself included, take a little break from talking about quarterbacks. So we need a clean break here. We're going to stop the QB discussion and move on to talking about defense. So I don't have a smooth segue for that, so I'll just tell you what to do. Like this video and subscribe. That's what we always ask you to do. Like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. That way you'll never miss any of our video content right here on YouTube. These Morning Pit videos every day of the week, Monday through Friday. Our weekly live show, the live stream we do on Wednesday nights here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. 8:30 p.m. Me and Jim Hammett will be live to talk to you for an hour about Pitt sports, and we'll take your comments and questions. You want to join the conversation. And then we'll have a post-game show after every game this season, and certainly we'll be doing one this week. It's going to be late. It's going to be like 1 in the morning when we start on Saturday night after the North Carolina game. It's going to be one of those late ones, but sometimes those are the most fun, to be honest. And so you don't want to miss any of that video content right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Make sure you like this video and subscribe. And then, of course, head over to the website, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com, the most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet, football, basketball, and recruiting, all right there. Panther-Lair.com. Talking about the live stream after the game reminds me I got to get something to drink for that game. We always like to have a few cold ones or warm, as the case may be, during those post-game shows, and I invite you to do the same, and I'm sure we'll have plenty to drink and plenty to talk about. I wanted to talk about the defense today just because there's like a handful of topics that have been kicking around in the old duder's head, and I just haven't been able to bring them up yesterday or Monday because we've been talking so much about the offense and about Phil Dracovic and the quarterback situation and everything like that. And so I thought we could take today and just talk about the defense a little bit. And the defense, I think you'd be hard pressed to find anyone who would disagree, has been good enough to win. I think the defense has been good enough to win in every game this season. Truly every game this season. They gave up 3 touchdowns to Cincinnati. That's a lot. That's more than you would like to give up, but it's not an insurmountable total. And I would say if you hold an opponent to 3 touchdowns or less, you should be able to win that game. They only gave up 2 touchdowns to West Virginia. And again, sort of the same thing. West Virginia had 211 yards of offense. You hold a team to 211 yards of offense, you hold a team to 2 touchdowns, you should be able to win that game. You're setting the bar low enough that most competent college offenses should be able to clear it. If you only give up 3 touchdowns, you only give up 2 touchdowns, you're keeping the game in range. Okay? Ultimately, I think that's probably a way that I often find myself looking at it. Can the defense, and this is not just this season, this is any season, any football, can the defense keep the game in range that the offense has a chance to win it? And that's not to say that one side of the ball is more important than the other. We've seen both extremes at Pitt, where either the offense was not good enough or the defense was not good enough, or where the defense played well enough to win or the offense played well enough to win. But what you really need, what you ultimately need, is the defense to keep the game in range to give the offense a chance to win. And I would contend that the defense has done that. They're 3 for 3 this season so far. Gave up more than they would like against Cincinnati. Both on the scoreboard, I'm sure they would tell you they don't care about keeping the game in range. They don't want to give up 3 touchdowns. And I know they were disappointed about the run defense, where they give up 216 yards on 42 attempts to Cincinnati. But by and large, as we look at it from the outside, I mean, the coaches and players are going to sit down and watch film and demand perfection and find all the little mistakes and things that could have gone differently to change the outcome of the game. Giving up 1 point is too many for coaches and players. They'll always find where those errors are and those areas for improvement. For those of us on the outside, though, that look at it sort of realistically, I think we look at it and we would say Pitt kept the game in range in both of those games to where a competent offense should have been able to win. And obviously, I mean, we're not going to go down the road of the competent offense, but I would say that. Now, there are some things to look at within the defense that it's not as easy as just saying, well, they played well enough to win and they got, screwed by the offense. If there's anything that came out of the first 3 games that was a bit of a concern, and actually let's just say 2 games. Who cares about the Wofford game? Wofford lost to Presbyterian. Wofford was winning and gave up 10 unanswered points to Presbyterian in the fourth quarter and ended up losing 23-20. We're not going to count the Wofford game. The Wofford game shouldn't count, it doesn't count, and it doesn't matter. It's irrelevant here. But if we look at the Cincinnati and West Virginia games, there are some concerns. Run defense comes to mind. 216 yards to Cincinnati. West Virginia only 151 yards, and it took them 51 rushing attempts to get there. So you're looking at less than 3 yards per carry as a team. But I think, and you would probably agree, there were enough moments in that game where Pitt needed to stop, but they gave up yards on the ground. More so than we're used to seeing with this defense. We're not used to seeing this defense give up yards on the ground. There were a couple instances last year where it did happen, but by and large, they've been, it's what they're built on, right? They're built to stop the run, and not just built in terms of personnel, but built in terms of scheme and structure to stop the run, to force other teams to be one-dimensional and then tee off with the pass rush. But they've given up 367 yards in those 2 games. Again, it took 93 attempts, and if you average that out, it's less than 4 yards per carry. But set the numbers aside and look at the eye test, I think you would probably agree with me that there's a little bit of a concern about the run defense right now. And I would think Pat Narduzzi would probably tell you the same as well, that they weren't as clean as they needed to be. They weren't as tight and detailed as they needed to be. And I am willing to pass some of it off to inexperience. You have some younger defensive ends out there who have made some mistakes in how they fitted the run. I think there were you have some inexperienced outside linebackers playing, particularly in this West Virginia game after Bengal Kamar got hurt, and we'll get to that in a second. You had Kyle Lewis playing a lot. You had Braylon Lovelace playing a lot. And when that's the case, you are, I think you can have some of those mistakes happen that ended up with things not being fit properly and West Virginia able to get some yards on the ground. There was one play that sort of really comes to mind. I think it was a read option play, and Nikai Johnson just went crashing inside and left it wide open for the West Virginia quarterback to run for a long gain and a first down. I forget if it might have been a third down or something like that, but it was it was a mistake. It was a mistake of youth. He didn't necessarily get physically beat, but he made a mental error that allowed an opportunity for a big gain for West Virginia. And those things, as we talked about, I think all off season, were sort of inevitable with this defense, with the turnover they were going to have and the personnel they were going to be using. Doesn't necessarily mean they're bad players, just means they're inexperienced and they have to learn from that. They have to learn. Nikai Johnson has to learn how to play a read option, and he's probably been coached on it. He's probably been drilled on it. I'm sure they're coaching him on it and drilling him on it this week, using that film as an example. But it was sort of inevitable that you would have that. whether it was expected or not, whether it was inevitable or not, it's concerning to have watched. And as we go into this game against, this Pitt game against North Carolina, you're looking at it, and I mean, the first thing that you're thinking is, oh, yeah, absolutely. Drake May is the big problem here. He threw for 400 yards against, who they play, Minnesota this past weekend. I think they played Minnesota. I forget. There were like 6 ACC teams that played Big Ten teams this week. And, yeah, North Carolina beat Minnesota 31-13. May threw for 414 yards and 2 touchdowns, although he did throw 2 interceptions. He's now thrown 4 picks in 3 games. But the thing about North Carolina, and what really kind of concerns me a little bit here, is they're running the ball really well this year as well. They're averaging almost 200 rushing yards per game, and that's with only running for 105 yards against Minnesota. They've been putting up a lot of yardage on the ground, and this is a concern for me because Pitt's run defense has shown some holes, and now they're facing an offense that's very explosive with the passing game and also has developed a pretty effective rushing attack. And if Carolina can complement Drake May's ability and talent and execution in the passing game with an effective running game against a Pitt defense that has shown some holes in the run defense, and we know is already susceptible to a talented quarterback. I mean, we've seen countless talented quarterbacks, Drake May included, go off against this defensive scheme over the past 8 years. And that's really troubling, and that's concerning. And I don't mean to I said we were going to break away from the quarterback conversation. I don't mean to bring all the doom and gloom from that talk into this one, but it's a reality as you head into this game. There's a lot of concern about how they're going to stop North Carolina, not just Drake May, but Hampton and the rest of the running backs and May as a runner and the overall North Carolina rushing attack. That's a concern. It's something to keep an eye on. Another thing to keep an eye on is the status of Bengal Kamar. He left the game in at West Virginia, I think in the first half. I think it was in the second quarter. I didn't get the exact play when he went out. But if he's unavailable to go this week, and I'm setting aside all the jokes about Bengal Kamar being the greatest defensive player since, Lawrence, like he's a combination of Lawrence Taylor and Dick Butkus and Ronnie Lott all in one body. It's an amazing thing to behold. I'm setting aside those jokes. He's an important part of the defense, and he's certainly an important part of the linebacking core. And if there was one thing, as we talked about the linebackers all off season, we talked about the strength of the linebackers and how they were going to be really good, and I thought this could be one of the best linebacking cores that they've had. The caveat that always came with it is that the depth was questionable. That you could have Kamara, Shane Simon, Solomon DeShields as your starting 3. You could have Brandon George as a backup, really to the middle or the money linebacker spots. Although I'm not entirely sure that he has both of those. He might just be a backup middle linebacker. But then you really didn't have much outside of those guys. You didn't really have much. You definitely didn't have much in terms of experience depth, and you weren't really sure how much depth they had that they could count on. Now, Kyle Lewis has gotten a lot of praise from the coaches. We've heard a lot of good things about him on and off the record, and we've seen him kind of step in as that backup star linebacker. But then beyond that, you're really kind of relying on freshmen, and that's Braylon Lovelace, that's Rasheem Biles, that's Jordan Bass. And I don't think Bass has gotten in any games so far this season. Biles played a bit on defense against... No, Biles didn't even play on defense against Wofford, actually. As I just kind of glance over the stats real quick, he obviously was in on special teams against West Virginia, the block punt. And then Lovelace has gotten into the games. Lovelace has been playing, and he played in the Wofford. I don't think he played in the Cincinnati game. He played the Wofford game and the West Virginia game. Played 23 snaps against West Virginia. Ended up recording 5 tackles in that game, and that was all in the aftermath of Bengal Kamar going out. And it's interesting to see. We talked about the Cincinnati game when Kamara just got a rest and Nick Lappy replaced him. It was a drive down near the goal line. Cincinnati started near the goal line, and Cincinnati busted a big run, and basically with Nick Lappy missing a tackle, Lappy played 2 snaps, and that was the last we saw of him. Kamara played the rest of that game. And in this game on Saturday night, when Kamara got hurt, it was Lovelace who came in at the money linebacker spot. And as they went through the rest of the game, Lovelace played a lot, 23 snaps, like I said. They also brought in Brandon George to play middle linebacker and shifted Shane Simon back outside to money linebacker, which is where he played last year. And that very well may be your starting lineup heading, for this game on Saturday night. If Bengal Kamar cannot play, then you're looking, my guess is you're going to be looking at Brandon George in the middle, Shane Simon at money linebacker, and Solomon DeShields at star. I mean, that's a group of experienced guys, talented players, a little less talented, I think, than the trio that involved Kamara, but should be good enough. But again, your depth is going to be a question because now you really don't have a backup middle linebacker. It's Shane Simon moving from money back to middle. Shane Simon might have to play every snap in this game. And then, your outside linebackers, your backups are a freshman and a redshirt freshman. Guys playing really for the first time this season with Lovelace at money and Kyle Lewis at star. And potentially you work in a Rasheem Biles or Jordan Bass. But the story's kind of all the same there in terms of inexperience and young players. And so the depth of that position, and I feel like we said this a lot in the offseason, talented position, good players, a lot of experience, not a lot of depth. And if they run into an injury issue, which they may be in the middle of one right now, if they run into an injury issue, that depth is going to be tested. And it's not going to be, you're not going to replace them with a lot of guys who have a lot of experience. And so that's something to keep an eye on. That's a concern, to be sure. You move back in the defense to the safety position, and that was certainly one of the most interesting positions on Wednesday night. Donovan McMillan got his first start of his Pitt career, lined up at boundary safety, recorded 18 tackles, the most by a Pitt player since, I want to say, the Military Bowl in 2015, when Matt Golombos, I think, had 19 tackles. And it's funny because that was against a triple option offense in Navy, right? Where you would expect your middle linebacker or anybody playing in the box to have a ton of tackles. We saw that going back as far as, Scott McKillop in 2008 or Dan Mason in 2009, those middle linebackers piling up tackles against the triple option offense. But it's funny because Pat Narduzzi sort of offhandedly referred to West Virginia's offense as a triple option. And sure enough, Donovan McMillan piled up the tackles in that game. So he started and played at boundary safety the entire game. Javon McIntyre played the field safety position the entire game. And I think we took that as being a response of P.J. O'Brien getting benched. O'Brien got replaced basically by McMillan in the Cincinnati game. O'Brien had started at field safety and Javon McIntyre at boundary safety. They took O'Brien out, moved McIntyre to the field safety, brought in McMillan in the Cincinnati game. When McMillan then started the West Virginia game and O'Brien didn't play at all, I think we assumed that meant O'Brien had been benched and McMillan passed him. Corey Sanders told us yesterday, the safeties coach, he told us yesterday that not necessarily, that O'Brien apparently was banged up a little bit last week, so he maybe was available, but maybe wasn't, and that was the reason that they played like that. The other reason, too, is that because of West Virginia's run-heavy offense, that favors a player like McMillan lining up at boundary safety, which makes a lot of sense. I mean, the guy is a tackling machine, particularly against the run, so if you're going to play a team that's going to be run-heavy, it's going to make a lot of sense to bring him in and play him there, and that probably is part of the reason that he played as much as he did in the second half against Cincinnati. North Carolina is obviously going to attack through the air more than probably those two teams put together. Actually, let's see. What would the stat on that be? So West Virginia and Cincinnati combined for 38 passing attempts. I don't think there's any question Drake May is throwing more than 38 passes against Pitt on Saturday night, right? If I gave you 38.5 or 37.5, whatever you want to set the line at, if I gave you over under 38, let's not do the half thing. So you can even call it push if you want. But if I gave you over under 38 on Drake May pass attempts Saturday night, you're taking the over, right? I mean, I'd be shocked if he throws less than 40 passes. So you're going to see more of that. And I think you could end up seeing more of the Javon McIntyre, P.J. O'Brien pairing unless Carolina if somehow Pitt's able, I shouldn't say somehow, but if Pitt's able to defend the pass well and Carolina starts running the ball effectively, you could see more Donovan McMillan to try and counter that. But keep an eye on that, of which safeties you see back there. Is it 7-3 or is it 7-5? Or is 25 out there? Steph Hall, who played on special teams but didn't get any snaps on defense the other night. And then the last thing on defense that I wanted to say, and it struck me this week, and it's I'm not fully convinced about it yet. Well, I'm partially convinced about it yet, but this team really misses Kalijah Kancey. Really misses Kalijah Kancey. And I don't think that's any shock. I think most people expected them to miss Kalijah Kancey. I mean, he's, All-American defensive tackle, goes in the first round. Yeah, when you lose a guy like that, you're going to miss him. They have 9 sacks as a team through the first 3 games. 4 of those were in the Wofford game. The defensive line has 6 sacks. Dayon Hayes has 2. Devin Danielson has 1. Bam Brima has 1. Sam Okunlola has 1. And Nate Temple and David Green have a half sack each. Decent number. 6 sacks out of the defensive line through the first 3 games, averaging 2 sacks per game. And it's good. Out of the defensive line, I mean, it's good. You expect a little bit more. You look for a little bit more. Pressure-wise, according to Pro Football Focus, just as I kind of look down their stats and the way they track pressures, Dayon Hayes leads the team with 12 pressures. The next highest defensive lineman in terms of pressures is DeAndre Jules, who has 4. Nate Temple has 4. Bam Brima has 3. Devin Danielson, 2. Sam Okunlola, 1. David Green, 1. Tyler Bentley, 1. So you're getting okay sack production. You're getting minimal pass rush production. Now, again, West Virginia and Cincinnati didn't throw the ball as much. They obviously focused on running. And so that's a little bit different. That's going to skew those volume stats. But in terms of, I hesitate to bring up the pass rush win rate because I know everybody's all mad about that with Myles Garrett and TJ Watt. But Dayon Hayes, under 20%. Bengal Kamar, under 18%. Sam Okunlola, under 17%. Devin Danielson, 11%. And then you get guys under 10%. Nate Temple, DeAndre Jules, Tyler Bentley. Kind of running down the list. These guys under 10% on their pass rush win rate. And not a great stat, not a perfect stat. I understand that. But just as a general idea of how effective they've been or how effective they haven't been, those aren't great numbers. Even if you want to take away the volume numbers and say, well, yeah, they don't have many pressures, they don't have many sacks because of how Cincinnati and West Virginia played their offense, those win rate percentages are maybe a little bit more indicative. And all of it, again, kind of builds up to some of the concern heading into Saturday night. You don't pressure Drake. If you don't pressure Drake May and you can't stop the run, or you're ineffective stopping the run, or you're not as consistent stopping the run as you used to be or as you need to be, I said it right at the top, right? The defense's job is to keep the game in reach for the offense. I think it's going to be really tough to do that. Never mind what we think about what the offense is capable of reaching. Like, what is the bar that the offense has, or that the defense has to achieve to keep the game, quote unquote, in reach for the offense? I mean, it's not a high bar. Like, if you get to 28, it might be out of reach for the offense. If you're going to keep the game in reach for the offense, you've got to be under 20 points. And we've seen even, this past weekend, that wasn't enough. I think it's going to be hard to keep Carolina's offense under 20 points. I don't think that's going to be an easy task. Particularly when you look at some of the areas where Pitt is good and where Pitt has struggled defensively. And if you have Bengal Kamar out of the mix, you have some more of that youth on the field at outside linebacker, it's going to get dicey. But we'll see, right? I mean, that's the coaches know who they're working with. The coaches know who the players are and who they're playing against. They're gonna have to have them ready for the biggest challenge of the season yet. Because Carolina, they're kind of rolling right now. There's a lot of teams on the schedule that are rolling right now. Basically, everybody Pitt has 9 games left. 7 out of those 9, the teams look really good, or at least pretty good. And obviously, Pitt's not in a position to take anything for granted, but there's only 2 games you look at right now, and you're like, yeah, that team stinks. Could get dicey. But we'll see. Tomorrow, we'll get back to the talk about the quarterback, or maybe the running backs. Maybe we'll talk about the running backs and the offensive line tomorrow. And we'll probably talk about the quarterbacks too. But either way, make sure you like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Head over to the website, Panther-Lair.com for all the latest Pitt sports news. And don't forget to tune in tonight, live, 8:30 p.m. right here, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Jim Hammett and I will be hanging out talking about Pitt sports, and we'd love to hear from you. Your thoughts on the quarterback situation, your thoughts on Frank Cignetti, Pat Narduzzi, the defense, Drake May, whatever comes to mind. Let's talk about it tonight. 8:30 p.m. right here, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Thanks for tuning in today. I hope you've had a great week so far, and I hope your Wednesday goes well. We're halfway through the week, headed into the home stretch, leading up towards North Carolina on Saturday night. So have a great Wednesday. We'll talk to you tomorrow on the Morning Pit right here, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.